Tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
I was in a funk on Friday. I was standing outside the Tennessee Valley Federal Credit Union where I have an account. And I was saying, I'm done. I'm done. I'm finished. I'm sick of what I'm doing. I'm tired. I'm worn out. There are many obstacles in front of running a business. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a journalist. I'm a broadcast journalist. I'm a writer. I'm a reporter. And I'm an editor. And yet here I own this business. And I'm just fighting the circumstances that you, my listener, fight every day. Whether you're an employee in a business or whether you're the owner of that business, we all face many of the same struggles. They take the same shape. Often they are preceded. They have a prefix to their names, and that prefix is the dollar sign. The prefix of the dollar sign is too small. The demands on the action and the dollar sign are too great, and so we feel despair sometimes. We feel that we should just quit, and that was what I was saying to myself. I'm done, sort of shaking my head, and I thought, what would I do if I didn't have a radio station? What would I do as a writer if I didn't have you, my listener, and this platform? And also, if I didn't care a lick anymore about writing at Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who mattered. After all, that website allows me to say that I'm the blogger with the biggest pen in Chattanooga, the 180-foot tower in Saudi Daisy, with 1240 a.m. beams emanating powerfully across the countryside and entering into houses, cars, trucks, offices, earbuds, and smartphones. Also with 92.7 FM doing the same thing in a much greater area. And also we have 95.3 HD4, a high definition FM channel 4. And I was in despair just over all the circumstances of being in business and looking at cash flow, looking at my customers, looking at the people I'm trying to serve. That's you, right? You, my listener, are the first person I'm trying to serve. But then there is the secondary and the tertiary customers or constituents. That would be the advertiser, the man who writes the check to have his name brought before you. He wants you to eat at his restaurant, have his car fixed with you, send your pet to Wolf Teaver Animal Clinic. All the people who count on me to be the medium between you and them, right? That's why we're the media. The media are betweeners. We're between two people, you, the listener, and the man who's running a business and wants you to be his patron, wants you to be his friend, and to do business with him. We're the party that makes that relationship happen because we're between you and the advertiser. So I thought to myself, why continue? Why bother? Is a giant business in the sense of it being a huge presence in Chattanooga, which is to say Nooga Radio. But on the other hand, which is really a small business, which has no employees, is entirely automated. We are the most high-tech media company in Chattanooga. Everything is ultra high-tech, even though our technology uses old machinery in the way of satellite feeds. These are very traditional in this medium, and so we use those as well. That's how Sean Hannity comes in from a satellite 30,000 miles above the surface of the earth. And I was also in despair about the sense that I had of the lack of reach of the argument that you come here to hear. Somehow it just seemed to me that this is such a weak argument. It has no strength. It does not have mass numbers. It does not have huge polling data. It does not have a huge draw when the arguments that we make here on the David Tulis program are written, right? The writing of these arguments doesn't go far. It doesn't have a huge audience. It's not a mass argument. It's not clickbaitable. It doesn't have curvaceous female lines adorning the cover. And I'm asking, why offer solutions when no one seems to want solutions? No one seems to care about solutions. They just want to hear the news, right? Maybe we could just give the news and move on. Maybe that's enough. And you, my listener, you think, well, there aren't any solutions. And so you come to me for a few minutes, and if anything, I just light your sense of fantasy about what could be, And you think about your job, you think about your children in school. You don't like them there. You've heard about the Worth County mass search where the officers, about 40 cops and deputies, massage the testicles and penises of students and put their hands on the crotches of females and put their fingers under their bras and under their panties in a mass search. You know that that's happened. You heard about it. And you're seeing at our Facebook page, Nooga Radio, an accounting of that. And my indication that I'll be talking about that today. And there's nothing you can do about that. And there's nothing you can do about that kind of threat. You just say, I can't change that. I can't go to a private school. I can't afford that. And I can't homeschool because my wife and I just don't have it together. We don't have our ideas together. We don't have a positive ethic sufficient to warrant that. All we can do is react to things and not like things and take what's offered to us that's free. You have $1,900 in the bank. You don't have savings. You sold your mutual fund recently to pay a medical bill. You smoke, and your wife you think may have a small pill problem, and you're concerned. And there are many other reasons for despair as well. Christianity seems so weak. It doesn't have a social theory. It doesn't have a social ethic. Innovations in Christianity, which you understand, you're not a practicing Christian perhaps, but you understand that Christianity has very fixed maxims by which its adherents follow God and worship. And you hear reports, namely from me, about irregularities and innovations. For example, the Lord's Supper offered without wine, but grape juice. How can, if that's important, if Lord Jesus said we have the Lord's Supper with wine, how can men innovate and offer grape juice instead, which is not fermented? How is that possible? How about all the other things that are innovations in worship, where you have the Lord's Supper and the minister does not even fence the table? A church that cares about the privatization of Christianity and has a private theory of Christian belief and Christian conviction and the Christian life, and where the individual is held in the highest esteem, and civilization and Christendom are held in low esteem, the individual, not even commanded when taking the Lord's Supper on the first Sunday of the month, not even commanded to repent of his sins and not come to the table if he has any unrepented of sin. Now, you might say that's just a detail in Christianity, but you know about the rules of the Lord's Supper. You know about that. You've heard that a man imperils his soul if he takes the supper and he clings to his vices. And you've heard about that from your teen years in church, and you remember it. And yet you know that these things are happening throughout Christianity, the care of the individual, and yet the individual is not compelled to enter the antithesis, which is Christianity, which is light and dark, good and evil, wheat and tare, sheep and goats, the fish that are thrown back and the fish that are kept. The antithesis, and the Christians don't enter into it anymore. They just go along in a great fellowship on the Lord's Day in the Lord's house with innovations galore, handshaking, coffee fixing in the middle of the worship service. And we think that there's strength there. Well, there's no strength there. And you look at the news, you look at national economy, you look at President Trump, you look at the Congress, you look at wars, at terrorism, and you think, how can anybody argue about something so petty as local economy and the free market in Chattanooga and beyond? Well, I'll care about the beyond, but who cares about Chattanooga? What can be done here? After all, it is just Chattanooga. Does it really matter that the mayor is unfaithful to his wife, that he's a telegenic, progressive Jewish lawyer and a cultural Marxist who, in his adultery, who follows the existential theories of Jean-Paul Sartre, the great French philosopher? Does it really matter? Does it matter that somebody says that? Well, the fact that I've said things like that make me unemployable by anybody else. There's no way anybody would hire me as your host here on the David Tulis program at Nooga Radio, 1240 AM and FM 92.7. There's no way anybody would hire me. And so, in a way, because I'm telling the truth, capital T and small t, the derivative truths that flow from the great one, I can't be hired by anybody in Chattanooga. If I was going to be employed, I would have to probably move to Texas or a right to carry state somewhere else, maybe Vermont. or New Hampshire. I couldn't find a living here. I would have 2 houses to sell. My mother, 93 years old, living in one. It would be very difficult. So I look at things like that and I say, why, when I'm thinking of giving up, thinking of quitting, I say there would be many problems to do that. It would be very difficult to quit. To say I'm done, I'm finished, I'm getting out of the radio business. And then I think, wait a minute, I got into this business to help somebody prosper. And it's an interesting story how I met a reporter for this radio station, David Allen Carmichael, who was at a Tea Party meeting. I think it may have been one where Dave Crockett spoke. I remember it was after the meeting, and this man was asking very aggressive questions. I said, who is he? Who asks questions like that in Chattanooga? And so I met David Allen Carmichael, who's a famous litigator over the lack of a social security number. And in fact, I'd heard of him, as I remembered later. And he introduced me to Confederate Mike. And Confederate Mike was in despair, too. He was about to shut down the radio station. He was about to shut it down. And the Saudi Daisy radio station, he couldn't make a go of it. People in Saudi Daisy don't buy advertising. They're very difficult people to whom to sell. And he was about to quit. And I said, look, let me help you. Let me help you. And so this show has been on the airwaves with a couple of breaks for about 4 years, more than 4 years. And here I am today with you. And I do thank you for giving me just a couple minutes of your time here, where we argued that you should love your neighbor and buy local. Who would hire me? The man who makes reference to queer theory, the man who shows lug butts in their real life, who takes on crony capitalism, even if it's in Tennessee, right? Even if it's here in Chattanooga, against someone whom I might meet at a party, right? Someone who I've effectively condemned as being a crony capitalist and a state capitalist, and not making perhaps friends in important places, because I don't care to make friends in important places, but I do care for you, my listener. And that in itself, in a way, is a problem. How can I care for you, my listener? How do I do that? And I came back to last night. I came back after just being morose all weekend, being unkind to my wife, Jeanette, being aloof, being you might say harsh with my words. And when I didn't have to be, not having God's grace in my heart, even though I took the Lord's Supper, even after that, I was still, I think, sinning from moroseness, sinning from not having hope in what I'm doing, and feeling just isolated and marooned and detached. That's how I felt as I said, I'm getting out. And I said that to myself numerous times Friday, fewer times on Saturday, and then Sunday, I had a conversation with my partner here at the radio station. I said, well, I got to come back to why I first joined you, and that was to help you succeed in the radio business. And so my job is to help Confederate Mike have the best radio station in Chattanooga, and indeed one of the few locally owned media platforms here. I think the Black station may be locally owned. Nooga.com is locally owned. Chattanoogan.com, run by John Wilson. He owns that. That's a long-standing, probably the longest-standing local web newspaper in the country. And then there's Nooga Radio. This is David Tulis, and I have a caller on the line. Caller, what's on your mind?
Hey, David, I love your dissertation. I don't think people realize what we go through here, what you go through, what you've done, and because we don't get instant feedback like an audience does. And people have to realize that the station here is to affect change, which you've done over 4 years. Again, helping to get fluoride out of the water, helping Marvin not to have to deal with jail time, so on and so forth. And the truth, we don't belong to any political groups or organizations. Our allegiance is to you, the listener. And sometimes that's very trying when we work 18 hours a day and you don't get the feedback from the listener or the client or whatever. It almost seems like, why are we spinning our wheels here? Why are we trying to help people in knowledge that they're not going to get from any other media? Because announcers would be fired, as you said. What goes on this radio station, at a typical radio station, the announcer will be fired in about 2 minutes. I know that because I've been there and it's happened. in the same situation you're in, working as hard as you do, trying to explain to the individual that this radio station is here for them and the client. And sometimes you don't get that pushback. You don't get that feedback. And it can be depressing at times. It can be very, very, I don't think the listener understands that we're human beings. And when we put something out, and David, you work tirelessly. He's up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, prepping for your show and so on and so forth. And that's not that they say, oh, well, poor us, feel sorry for me because, you know, my dad works in a salt mine or a coal mine. But the point is that announcers are human beings too. Stations have a heart and soul, and there's no feedback or pushback. You get to think in terms of, you know, it's not about money, whether advertisers come on or not. Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing and serving the individual? Did I hit that on the head?
Well, you did. Yes, Mike. Thank you. You hit it on the head.
and you being there is the heart and soul of our local station and local economy. And I think that's why we hit it off. That if we can't sell the idea of localism, we don't have a country. Look at the malls failing. Look at brick and mortar failing. Look at people running around no longer stopping in, saying hi to your teller, just going through the line. And fast food just running through the line instead of, you know, saying, hi, how are you doing today? We are becoming, and I hate to see that in Chattanooga, David, because it's that way in the big cities. And there's still hope for Chattanooga. I've been here 5 years. There's still hope. These are some of the best people I've ever met. I'm a Chattanoogan now. I love Chattanooga. I choose to be here. But the Chattanoogans have to embrace the Southern culture and the Southern heritage and the Nooganomics, which is, I think, based in the Southern soul.
Well, I agree, Mike. Thanks for calling. Yeah, the idea of Nooganomics is really lococentrism, and as I like to explain it when my guard is down, is that Nooganomics is really it is Christianity applied. If you apply Christianity, you get Nooganomics here because we live in Chattanooga. If you live in Irving, Tennessee, or Charleston, Tennessee, you get you get Charlestonomics or Irvingomics. That's what you get, and it's always thinking of the local, thinking of your neighbor. And there's so many things occurring, you know, all around us in the digital economy, in the news, in the national economy, and in the coming meltdown, that it's easy to think that the ideas of local economy are just petty, that they're just sentimental, that they're just a kind of regional claptrap that sounds good and feels good, and it creates a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and so on. And if you have that from me, then I'd like to give it some support, and it's not just a matter of your emotional well-being or person. But we do put a lot out for you, our listener here on the radio station, and we've been trying to figure out where to go, what to do, and I have concluded that if I didn't have this platform, that makes me the writer with the biggest pen in Chattanooga, I don't know what I would do, because writing on the internet is impossible. There's no money there. You can't. There's not even a hope of earning any kind of money as a serious journalist and writer on the internet. It's just impossible. Before I met Confederate Mike and David Allen Carmichael at that Tea Party meeting, I had spent a year, an absolutely fruitless year, writing on Nooganomics. It was fruitless. It was hopeless, and I was also in despair, thinking to shut down. There was just no way that these arguments were gaining any traction. No one cared to read about them. No one really cared to hear about them. And so here on the radio, we have the same problem of not knowing, right? I've got you, my listener, and I'd like to have a second listener. I really would. And so we have this sense of non-affirmation and alienation. But on the other hand, we know that this medium is very passive, and it's incredibly vital and organic, and its power is in its immediacy. That's why we tell our advertisers, look, our listeners hear propositions from the news, and they hear your propositions as well, and your pitch is immediate and present, and it enters into the mind. It's between the listener hears it between his ears, as it were, and on FM or AM, and or on Facebook or on YouTube, and you make your connection there. And so the lack of feedback should not defeat our sense of purpose, though it sometimes does set it back and bring a sense of humility and self-doubt and questioning. And that's what I've been going through. Now, I want you to know something, that vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. That is from a Supreme Court decision, and the name of that opinion, it came out in the 1980s. Let me find it. They're unavoidably unsafe, and that's Bristowitz versus Wyeth, and 2011 decision. And they're unavoidably unsafe, and we're going to talk about that. There's a new book out by Tom Bollinger. I've got his important work, Cancer, Step Outside the Box. And we'll talk about vaccines, just in the interview that he's given to Franklin Sanders, the Money Changer newsletter. Vaccines are unavoidably unsafe, and you should be gravely aware of this issue. You should not get your children vaccinated at all. This is David Tulis. We've got more ahead. Now, it's an important announcement.